Good morning and welcome to the 1873 Alumni Speaker Series. My name is Rob Reed and I'm a 1987 graduate of then North Georgia College. Today I'm excited to be speaking to Paul Arcangeli, who is also a 1987 graduate and classmate. Before introducing Paul, I'd like to acknowledge the UNG Alumni Association for hosting this speaker series with the support of the North Georgia Corps of Cadets Association and the Women of UNG. Your membership in the Alumni Association supports programs such as this 1873 Alumni Speaker Series. You can become a member of the association today by simply going to the website listed on the screen below. If you have any questions for Paul, please use the comments function, and if we have time, we'll try to ask some of your questions. Now that I would like to introduce you to my fellow classmate. Paul Arcangeli is currently the Majority Staff Director for the U.S. House of Representatives Committee on Armed Services. A public servant of more than 3 decades, Paul first served in the United States Army, then as a Department of Defense civilian, and as a professional staffer to the House of Representatives. For the past 11 years, Paul has served as the Staff Director of the House Armed Services Committee, where he is the primary advisor to the committee chairman, the 31 majority members of the committee, and the leadership of the U.S. House of Representatives. In this position, Paul leads the committee staff and their oversight of the Department of Defense and directs the preparation of the annual National Defense Authorization Act. The NDAA provides direction to the Department of Defense on all fiscal and policy matters. It authorizes in excess of $700 billion annually, which funds all operations and acquisition for the United States military. Before his appointment to staff director in 2010, Paul had joined the Armed Services Committee staff in 2004. During his time on the committee staff, Paul has worked on 17 NDAAs, including shepherding the fiscal year 2021 NDAA, which was the only veto override in the bill's 60-year history. Before his service with the committee, Paul served as the director of the Department of Defense Humanitarian Demining Training Center. There, he and his staff trained special operations personnel to establish demining training programs in 43 countries. Paul traveled extensively to landmine-affected countries and supported this training and was a recognized landmines expert within the Department of Defense. Paul acquired his knowledge of landmines during his service as an explosive ordnance disposal officer in the United States Army. As an ordnance officer, he was stationed in Hawaii, Alaska, California, and New York. Paul holds a master's degree in information technology and management from the United States Naval Postgraduate School, and he has a bachelor's degree in biology from North Georgia. At North Georgia, Paul was a Georgia Military Scholarship recipient and a distinguished military graduate. And Paul is a member of the Sigma Chi fraternity. So Paul, let's talk about service to the nation. Where did you grow up and what led you to North Georgia?
So Rob, first, thanks. It's an honor to be here, and I'm glad to have a classmate with me today. So I was born in Alabama. I was born in Huntsville, Alabama. My father was a missile engineer. He was a World War II veteran, landed on the beaches of Iwo Jima. And then after he got out of the Navy, he ended up in Alabama doing missile work. And so myself and my 7 siblings lived in Alabama until I was a teenager, and we moved to Savannah. And I went to Benedictine Military School in Savannah. And, that was pretty formative. My father was focused on the military. My whole life was basically around the military. And then when I was a teenager, I'm plunked into a military uniform in a military school, in high school. So, all kind of went that way.
Well, I think you told me that you knew you wanted to be a soldier at around 6 years old.
I did. And when I was 6, I wanted to be in the Army. And I think there's even a picture of me, wearing a helmet and a bunch of, fatigues. That was my goal. And that was really what I was focused on from that age.
And that's a G.I. Joe over there on your desk.
Yeah, actually, hidden over on the corner is my EOD G.I. Joe. You have arrived when your specialty in the military is, a G.I. Joe.
All right. What was life like for you as a cadet and student at North Georgia?
I will tell you, it was fantastic. The 4 years I was there was really, for me, the most formative of my military life. It set me up for success. My family was in Savannah. I didn't get to go home every weekend because it was too far. And so, my entire life was centered around the school and my friends there. And that was great. But, you're immersed in the environment, and it's a constant leadership lab. And it took everything that I had learned already about the military, from being in the military school and being in the National Guard. It took all of that and it really focused it in a way that then served me well once I got commissioned in the Army.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. We both know that our time in the Corps of Cadets provided us with a start in a lifelong education and leadership. And can you relate how that early experience influenced your leadership philosophy that helps you motivate people in your job today?
I've said it before and I'll say it again, is that people don't necessarily follow you because you are wearing rank or because you're in charge. They follow you. You have to give them a reason. You have to figure out what motivates people, and then you have to motivate them. And it was at North Georgia, that was our daily life. There were a lot of people who were going to go in the Army. There were a lot of people who were motivated to be in the Army, and they were going to get up every day and put their uniform on right, and they were going to do what needed to be done. And then there were people who weren't going to be in the military, who were in the Corps Cadets, and they were there to go to school. And that is what the world is like. There are people who are coming to work, and you have to figure out how to motivate those people. They may not be focused on your mission. Your mission is not necessarily the most important thing to them. So you have to find out what is important to them and then provide it so that they can give their effort to get the mission done. And that was evident right there at North Georgia. And years later, I ended up at West Point. I was working at West Point while I was in the Army, and I watched cadets at West Point. They're all motivated and they're all driven and they're all trying to outdo each other. And then that made sense to me why many West Point cadets, when they get in the Army, have some mixed feelings about it, because it's not like West Point, whereas North Georgia is just like the rest of the world. And that really set me up for success later.
Great. I had this similar experience. If you can get a non-commissioning cadet that's a senior at North Georgia to clean his room, you can do anything.
That's right.
When we caught up with each other last week, I was particularly touched by how close lifelong friendships that began from your first days at North Georgia later helped provide opportunities that led to a new career direction and public service for you. Can you tell us about your career path and how those friendships interacted with you ending up serving on the Hill?
Sure. So, I was joking with you about how my career path is kind of like Forrest Gump. I'm basically the feather in the wind. So I was focused from the age of 6 to be in the Army. That's what I wanted to do. And it was the greatest thing when I was in the Army. I love the Army so much. My friends at school were my best friends, Eric Christensen, Jim Skelton, are still my friends. And although, sometimes they annoy me, like today, and I'm sure they're listening. So let me just say that, I've watched their careers and I was really proud of them. They both became colonels in the Army and retired from the Army. My career did not go that way. I entered the Army as an ordnance officer because I wanted to be an EOD officer. I was able to achieve that. After my command, I went to the Naval Postgraduate School to go to West Point. I went to West Point and worked at West Point for 2 years. And while I was a major at West Point, I had sudden cardiac arrest. I spent a period of time in the hospital, and it was difficult for me. And that whole episode could fill about 3 hours. But really, what it comes down to is I needed to find something else. And so I left. Sadly, I was retired from the Army after 13 years. I went to the private sector. I hated it. I truly hated it. And I needed something more. But at one point, when I was working in the private sector, I had someone say to me, we worship the almighty dollar here. And I don't, and I never did. And I knew that that's what my problem was. And so, I needed something. And my whole life had been about service to the nation was wearing a uniform. And here I was not doing any of that. And that was a hard thing for me. So I started casting around for something new. I found the humanitarian landmine job and was able to go back to the Department of Defense in a new way, using my EOD experience of years before, and still serve the country as a civilian, as a Department of Defense civilian. I did that for a few years, and then the war in Iraq started. And I went to Iraq as a DoD civilian very early in the war, drove around in a pickup truck and looked at minefields and tried to help the Department of Defense and the State Department plan their demining activities in Iraq. And I spent a little bit of time there. I came back for some surgery at Walter Reed. I was living in Missouri at Fort Leonard Wood. I needed a place to stay. My friend Jim was here in DC, and he and his wife Anita put me up while I was getting surgery. They let me stay at their house. And before the surgery, Jim's dad came over. Jim's dad was Congressman Skelton. And
but Jim's dad to you.
But Jim's dad to me, right? All those years of Jim's dad. So Congressman Skelton asked me, I heard you were in Iraq last week. What did you see? I said, not so good. This is early in the war. This is in the summer of 2003. And I'd driven around a lot. I'd seen a lot of things. And I said, you got some problems. And I explained what I saw. And he was surprised. He wasn't getting the same reports. And he said, I want you to talk to the committee staff of the Armed Services Committee. So I did not want to do that, but he insisted, as he was off to do. And he insisted that I do that. So I did. I spoke to the committee staff about what my experience was and what I had seen about IEDs, which were still new at the time. And then I went back to my job in Missouri and, back to doing landmines. And about 6 months later, the committee called me and said, we have a vacancy on the Armed Services Committee and we want you to come interview for it. And it was from that meeting that generated that connection that I then was offered a job here on the committee 17 years ago and started in the minority as a line PSM doing the readiness subcommittee. And that all stems from those connections that I made at North Georgia in Frog Week, actually not in Frog Week, in intro in 1983. So it really is kind of followed a strange course.
Wow. There are many of us that we were led to North Georgia for our desire to serve the nation. And we saw that as military service. But we don't realize that the military is not a lifelong job. And for different reasons, voluntary or involuntary, both of us realize that. It can end before we're even ready or we have another plan. Can you provide any advice from your story that you just told on finding a new career path that might help others find another way to serve our country once their military career is over?
Yeah, and you know this all too well, because you were doing what you love too, and it was ripped away from me. It was ripped away from me at a time that I didn't want to give it up. I loved what I did. I loved the Army, and I was not prepared for that. But this is public service, what I'm doing now. And so is working at the NIH, and so is working for the State Department, and so is working for the Justice Department or the Education Department. National service is a lot more than just wearing a uniform. And all of those people are focused on helping us and helping the nation. And I needed that. And you can't be bound by what you think your life is going to be, because life is going to have its way with you, and you need to be okay with that. And I found out that lesson the hard way. I think being flexible, be flexible, look at the opportunities as they come. I had a friend once say, never refuse the job not offered. So when you hear an opportunity, be open to those opportunities and imagine how that opportunity might work for you. And don't be bound by what your idea is of what the future might be, because I promise you it will change. It's been great since that. Once I found my place back in the government, I really felt comfortable doing national service in a different way.
So how did your biology degree end up playing any role in your career?
So, we were just joking about this, but my biology degree I needed a degree to be in the Army. And I picked biology because I liked it. And so I got a degree in biology that I never really intended to use. I intended to be in the Army. Maybe not the smartest thing for a person to do when they're 18, 19, 20 years old, but I was successful. And it kind of goes to something that I learned early on. Do things that you like to do. Do things that you are passionate about, and you will do them very well. If you aren't passionate about things, you won't do it well, you will not shine, and you will not get noticed, and you'll be unhappy. So I got that degree in biology, and to be honest, I've never used it professionally. I've only used it, to understand the world around me, or to understand issues that get tossed at me here in the Congress or in other places. But beyond that, I never actually worked it.
Well, I stayed away from that building except to learn the difference between astronomy and astrology, but that served me well. Tell us about your current role.
So I am the staff director of the Armed Services Committee here in the House of Representatives. And I have 56 employees who work for me, all professional staff who work in portfolio areas. We manage the National Defense Authorization Act, the largest bill that's passed out of the House annually. And we also have oversight over the Department of Defense and all the activities thereof. So we manage the hearings, we assist the members, we provide advice. And in many ways, it's just like my military life. I give advice to members of Congress. I give them the best advice I can. Elected members make decisions. I try and guide them to the decisions that are best for the country. When those decisions are made, they give me direction. And then I go and execute orders. I'm not elected. I don't decide. But it's important for me to have the depth of knowledge and the staff to have the depth of knowledge to be able to advise the members on things, because members of Congress are busy. And they have a lot of things that they're working on in a lot of different areas. They might be on the Agriculture Committee, the Financial Services Committee, and our committee. So they really rely on the professional staff of the committee to give that advice to them. And many of my staff are former military. And then we have a whole lot of what we like to say hill rats, people who have ground their way up through the machine until they have a great deal of substantive knowledge and then are able to come here to the committee and provide advice as well.
What is a common myth about your job or your field that you would like to debunk?
So this is funny because I've been here 17 years, and everybody assumes that this is the most partisan place in the world. And certainly, if you watch the news and pick your flavor, you're going to think it's the most partisan place in the world. And that is not always the case. And I would say that that's not how I would see it. I have worked in the minority, in the majority, in the minority, in the majority here in the House of Representatives. On this committee, many times you sit at a table, you never know who was working for which side when you sit down with the staff. And that's because it's a bipartisan thing. And I have watched members of this committee sit and talk and have lunch and laugh and travel and do things that you would never expect, because when the camera is on, that is one thing. They play to their constituencies, but in reality, they're people. And so it's not quite always as partisan as you might see. Certainly there are aspects of it that are. Certainly there can be hostility amongst members. But I would say that the biggest surprise for a lot of people is just how nonpartisan sometimes those interactions can be.
What are some of the accomplishments that you are most proud of in your services as staff director for the House Armed Services Committee?
So, it's funny. So my bill over time has become bigger and bigger, and it's now, last year was 3,000 pages long. And you'd think it would all be about defense and direction to the military and buying ships and planes, and it is. Except that when we get to the House floor, it can also pick up other things. And sometimes we need things to push it along. And the thing that I'm most proud of after 17 years is we were able to work into the bill paid parental leave for all civilian employees of the US government. It was a painful thing, but it was an idea that was born here in my office and brought to the members, and we were able to work that in. And so now every federal employee gets maternity and paternity leave, which was something that didn't exist. And I didn't really fully accept how big of a deal that was. At the time, I saw it as an opportunity to advance a bill because we needed more horsepower to get things moving. But really what it was is it gave lots of civilian employees in the federal government an opportunity to have children, which is, I just really had not considered that. But if you don't have vacation time before this, you couldn't do it. You just took unpaid leave. So that is what I'm most proud of, a non-military accomplishment.
Well, as an employment lawyer that deals with those laws in the private sector and public sector every day, a lot of people just don't realize what a big accomplishment that is. The private sector, usually, you get unpaid leave under the FMLA, but to have paid leave for federal employees, that's an impact that will last and impact a lot of people and a lot of children. So we thank you for that, Paul.
Well, I can't take credit any more than the idea. The members actually are the ones that decide, and they are the ones that put it in law. And it's an accomplishment that I'm proud to have a piece of.
Somehow that got stuck in that 1,000-page bill.
It wasn't easy.
What advice would you give someone who wants to pursue a career serving on the Hill, where I'm sure there are a lot of degrees from Ivy League schools, and unlike in the military, they might know nothing about North Georgia College or UNG?
This job is interesting. We don't actually produce anything, right? We make words here, and we make friends. And if you can make friends, then your words might actually become law. So it's an interesting environment. You don't have to have a degree in political science or international studies to be successful here. You need to have drive. You need to have you need to be flexible. You need to be able to interact with people and be successful in doing that. Some people have difficulty with that here on the Hill, but you need to be able to talk to people, and you need to be able to be quick on your feet. You need to be able to absorb topics and concepts that are outside of your normal experience, and then be able to intelligently put those things back together in a way that you can explain them to others. And so this job is not necessarily something that you train for in school. And as we often say, there's no user's manual with this job either. So my advice is, my advice is, why would you do this? But no, seriously, it is, these are hard jobs. You're working with very intelligent people who have high expectations. Here in the Congress, they don't necessarily pay as well as in other places in the government because they're not on a schedule. So that can be problematic. But at the end of the day, sometimes you have your hand into something that really is fantastic, and you might actually have a say in trying to help something big that helps everyone in the country.
I wanted to ask you about something small, but might be a good piece of advice to people working. You're standing at your regular standing desk. Tell us about how you came to use a standing desk and how that serves you well.
So it's funny. And my office I have a bunch of sofas in my office for meetings and everything else. And this is my space right here. And everything else is kind of, communal space for my staff and everyone else who comes in. And I ended up at a standing desk because I'm more comfortable standing first. But over the years, as I've gotten older, standing is actually a better way for me to not have the problems that I would have if I sat down all day. And it is easy to spend a lot of time sitting here in these jobs. We spend a lot of time reading and doing email, and this is much easier. And I also, when I'm standing, I'm much more quick to walk out of my office and down the hall and check on all of my staff, which is one of the things I'm constantly doing. Is I'm always visiting, make certain I know what's happening down in the machine of these 56 staffers, because if I'm not paying attention, then all kinds of things can happen down there. And I'm certain that, on any given day, someone down there is trying to think of a way to get me fired. So I'm always visiting.
I think leadership by walking around and talking is something we learned a long time ago at a place in Dahlonega.
Yep, that's exactly right. Interact with the people around you, care about them, know about what they're doing and what's important to them. and that's going to help you figure out how to make them successful.
What would you say you've given strengths that people need to have? What would you say are the particular strengths that you brought to the job?
I am a bulldog on things once, as I said, I'm passionate about things, and I get passionate about things, and I really fight for things that are right. And I really am focused on doing right by our service members, the national defense, the taxpayer, and my members' constituencies. I'm passionate about that. And so you really have to be dedicated, and you have to work hard. You also have to be able to detach yourself emotionally and personally from the work you do. Because here, being attached to something doesn't make it more successful. As a matter of fact, it can be a problem. I have to know when to let go of those good ideas, because compromise is what I do. It may not exist in other places in the federal government or in the Congress, but it exists on this committee. Compromise is the core of American politics, and it is the core of what we do. And so being able to recognize what's important and let go of the things that aren't to try and get to the greater good, I'm good at that. And that still serves me well here.
As we close our interview or get towards the end, do you have a particular teacher or mentor at North Georgia that had a significant impact on you?
So a lot of them, right? There are a lot of teachers that I remember and I think really well of, but the one who sticks with me the most is the one who's now a lieutenant general, James Terry. But at the time, it was a captain, post command captain. He taught us military science 400, and he taught us so many things in that one class that I still use to this day, about being a leader, about leading from the front, about being decisive, about taking care of the people who work for you. And he gave us real world examples as a captain that then I applied as a lieutenant and a captain, and I still apply those. He said to lead from the front and demonstrate proficiency, to be confident. All of those things served us. And you know him now as a general, and we knew him as a captain, and we knew then that he was going to be a general. And the advice he gave us and the kinds of things he taught us still affect me and still make me successful today.
And me today. I know there was a book not long ago that came out of a TED Talk, Leaders Eat Last. And we learned that way back then from Captain Terry.
That's right.
At that time, right?
That's
Paul,
exactly.
on behalf of the Alumni Association, I want to thank you for providing us with your time today and joining the speaker series. Our entire North Georgia community is thankful for your public service to the nation, and I know the class of 1987 is especially proud of you. If you would like to connect with Paul, we have provided his email address at the bottom of the screen. I want to also thank all of our live viewers for joining us today. A video of this session will be available on our YouTube channel, so please share this interview session with your fellow alumni and young people who are thinking of public service. It was great catching up with you, Paul. Thanks again for your public service to our nation.
Thank you, Rob.